Now, a Christian man has been sentenced to death under blasphemy laws in Pakistan, and I want to get in to his specific case. It's really heartbreaking. But before we get there, what are these blasphemy laws and how do they work?
Well, Pakistan has some of the most difficult and stringent blasphemy laws in the world. Several countries have them. Essentially, it's a vigilante type law which allows anybody to accuse somebody else of blasphemy within the Islamic law. And the reason why it's so problematic is because of the court system and the way these are adjudicated. You have somebody who's making a claim that in most cases can't be substantiated. Secondly, that blasphemy can be any sort of offense that the person interprets it as. So, in other words, in some cases, they might say, "Hey, I'm a Christian," and a person could say, "Well, that's blasphemy against Muhammad." And thirdly, the punishment in Pakistan is the death penalty. So there's no proportionality to a particular situation. So you have anybody can make a charge that can't be validated. It's entirely subjective as to what the crime is, and you go to the death penalty for it. So you could see why that would be problematic. If it was once in a while, once a year, you'd be horrified by it. But in Pakistan, it's happening regularly. We had a case on May 18th where somebody was accused of blasphemy. You have another case that we're discussing today, May 30th, where a young man, 18 years of age, is accused of blasphemy, and nobody can quite seem to understand what it was he has done. This is the kind of thing which is being used against Christians and religious minorities in Muslim countries to great effect, unfortunately.
Well, because, to your point, here in America, we think about justice, right? And we have all sorts of debates about whether or not justice is being served. But the point is, people have due process. You have to have evidence. The system is imperfect, but it's a system of justice. When you're talking about a system like this, anybody could come up and say anything. They could make it up. And in the case we're talking about today, according to the attorney who was, involved in this case, there was no evidence really presented. And so that was going to be a question. You sort of answered it, but I want to dig in a little bit on it because I think I want people to really understand this, that it seems like for Christians in particular, there is no real justice. I could just say, hey, you said this thing about Muhammad, or you showed me this picture, and that's it. You're on trial, right? I mean, there's really no way out of that, it seems like.
Well, that's absolutely right. We had a case last year in Pakistan where a couple was accused of blasphemy, and the essence of it was that they had sent a text to somebody saying that they were Christians. But first of all, they didn't speak English. Secondly, they were illiterate. These Christians were uneducated, but they were followers of Jesus. So nothing about the case made sense, but they were still in jail with the charge, being blasphemy and the penalty, the death penalty. In this case, this young man was accused of showing some kind of images which were blasphemous at 3 a.m. in the morning to 9 to 10 people. The 9 to 10 people is not specified. The images were never specified. He was in bed at the time he was arrested. His parents were there. So nothing adds up about this except one thing, and this is critical, that this family is known to be Christian, that they have somehow become a target of some radicals within their community for whatever reason, and they're bringing a charge against this 18-year-old young man. The file is marked secret. There's nothing open about it. They themselves can't see the charges brought, the specifics of the charges against it. The young man's name is Noman Masih, and he's in grave danger of losing his life.
And you gave those details, and again, in America, you would have an alibi. You'd be able to say, I was at home asleep. I mean, the idea that of course, anything is possible, but the idea that he's out in a park, and there's sort of two factors here, at 3 a.m. showing photos mocking the Prophet of Muhammad to this group of people. In America, we would say, well, that's religious free, that's free speech. We may not like it, but that's free speech. But even in this case, again, the attorney said, and you were just saying, the evidence doesn't appear at all to have been presented in court. And so you have this young man being given a death sentence. When this happens, because of the lack of justice, right now, what options do you have if you're given the death penalty in Pakistan under these blasphemy laws? Is there any recourse to appeal, a conviction like that?
Well, there is a system of appeals, but of course, if it's based on false charges and you don't know all the specifics of it to defend it, and thirdly, that there's an implicit idea that if it's overturned, that there'll be mob violence, which often happens in Pakistan. You get a very toxic cycle there, where the judges are afraid for their own lives to overturn these blasphemy uh, accusations, no matter how thin they are. And there's just no proportionality to it. The answer is that we need to really come together as the Western community and fight these blasphemy laws. Pakistan isn't the only country, but we need to understand that for Pakistan to be part of the international community, the business community, or any other country, there has to be some basis of law by which a person has the right to defend themselves, or at least to know the charges against them and to be able to defend themselves. Sounds obvious. It's not as obvious as it seems, and it's very tricky in multiple places around the world. You're not really the accusation would be, well, you're just trying to make an American system. No, what we're trying to do is find those things which are part of international law and apply them equally, no matter where you're at, and regardless of whether you're a Christian or you're a Muslim or you're a Hindu, across the board, everybody should be treated the same within that system of law. And Pakistan, in theory, has it, but in practice, the blasphemy law is a get out of jail free card, or more likely, a go to jail and die immediately charge with this death penalty.
You're describing a situation too where the authorities and the judges are afraid of mob violence, right? If you don't bring somebody up on charges, somebody makes this claim, oh, he's showing me images. You don't bring them up on charges, you have this chaos. I think it's actually a healthy thing to then instill an international fear of not being able to participate in the international system if these are the sorts of laws that are on the book, right? It's almost, and correct me if I'm wrong, but it's almost sort of creating that other pressure. They're more afraid of the internal pressure right now, but to change those laws and prevent these sorts of things from happening, because it's not about creating an American system. It's about creating a system of fairness where people don't die simply for what they believe, again, regardless of what faith they are. So I don't know if you want to react to that at all, but it seems to me that's what might be a solution to this.
Yeah, there needs to be international pressure on this. This isn't just about faith. This is about a system of laws that protect everybody from an accusation. I'm sure there are moderate Muslims or people who were simply just accused of blasphemy because it's just so wide, so undefined. If you have somebody you don't like, you can bring an accusation of blasphemy against them and they'll get the death penalty. And there seems to be no way on which to nail down what justifies being killed. And so it needs to be refined. There are even within the Muslim faith and Muslim scholars that write articulately about this and why this is a problematic thing, even within the Muslim community. But right now in Pakistan, it's being used very effectively, unfortunately, against Christians. Persecution is always built on a lie uh, that whips up a mob and gets them to think that, well, Christians are weird in this way, and there are all kinds of ideas around theology which frighten Muslims in certain communities like Pakistan, and then they bring these attacks. They think you worship three gods or that you drink blood. There's all sorts of lies that are built into this that foment this anger and fear and then bring these kinds of charges. So we have to just start with, what is the rule of law? What is the truth? And can people stand on the truth?
Two more questions for you. And just so people know, you head up Global Christian Relief. You do incredible work dealing with persecution, bringing it to light, and helping those who face it around the world. But I wanted to ask you, how can people? Obviously, we want to be praying for this young man, for Noman. How can we be praying for the family as well, though? Give us some specific maybe points based on what you know. I know in this story, the father has spoken out about how difficult this has been for the family, but oftentimes we only sort of talk about the victim, which is important. But how can we as believers be praying for everybody involved and touched by this specific situation?
Well, I think, one of the things that we see is that people want us to pray with them because they're in prayer over this. We're walking alongside of them. There is supernatural component to all of these sort of things that God says this is a spiritual battle. Boldness, courage. Boldness meaning like to stand tight, stand strong in the face of this very difficult and unfair and unjust accusation. That there must be a lot of fear. I pray always that people would be surrounded by those that love and support them. I think that's really important. There are ways that people can help. Of course, we have programs, others have programs in Pakistan that help these embattled Christian communities that help defend Christians who have these blasphemy charges up against them. So there are many ways if people are motivated and moved that they can support Christians in Pakistan or other places where they are persecuted for their faith.
And then final question for you, if people want to get more information on Global Christian Relief and the work you do, where can they go to do that?
globalchristianrelief.org. We're trying to tell the stories and connect the body of Christ so that you know what's happening to your persecuted believers. You can help them and resource them, but also so that you can learn the lessons of strength in their faith that they've already learned. It's going to help you in your walk. So that's globalchristianrelief.org. I hope folks will go there, download the prayer list, get involved in some way.
David, as always, appreciate your time today.
Thank you.